Touchdown Tampa Bay. You're listening to the Pewtercast.
Welcome to the Pewtercast. This is our final thought show grading out the Bucs at the Ravens. I am Brent Allen, your host. I'm joined, as always, as the season winds down, Mr. Ren Daxed. Ren, how's it going, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. You know, Cheryl has taken off to North Carolina. Don't know why I did that. But she's up there, so I'm here all by myself down here in Florida for Christmas, which is fine. You know,
I hear you got the heat on over there.
I got to turn the heat on. Freaking, what's the female version of Ebenezer? Ebenezerette with the heat is Cheryl. But yeah, you know, it's just a rough week for Buck fans. You know, even all of us who have sort of been conditioning ourselves, you know, knowing this day would come, doesn't really make it any easier. You know, after the loss on Sunday, and you want to appreciate these last two games, but you can't help start thinking about next year already. You know?
Yeah,
and possible coaching change. I should say probable coaching change, possible GM change. You know, all assistants may be gone. You know, coaches that we like, you know, offense and defense, they all might be gone. So it's
With that, guys, on today's episode, we're going to be diving back into this Ravens game one final time to see if maybe after a couple of days, after a rewatch, Ren, that you got to do, have our thoughts on this game changed at all from our instant cast, which we had earlier this week. And then we'll be grading out the game as well as we normally do. And we're going to be getting to some emails that you guys have been sending in. We might even have a few from last week where we missed this show last week. But we are back with a special guest this week, one that I'm actually really excited for. It is the one and only Justin Pawlowski, the commish, the host of the Bucs Uncensored Podcast. And boy, does he have some things to say. Justin, he's going to kick it off for us, so let's waste no more time in getting right into it. This is all what you're getting on today's episode of the Pewtercast.
You ready? Let's go. Yeah. For those of you that want to know what we're all about, it's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name.
Ren, I think I got numb when we were watching that Giants game, and
right,
kind of like, you know, all right. If they win, great. If they lose, whatever. It's going to be a new coach. So I'm just, my mind's kind of like on 2019. I'm just kind of like people are going to root for them to win or root for them to lose for a better draft pick. I don't care. You got O.J. Howard with the 19th pick. Whatever pick you get, I'm fine with. I just want them to get the right coach.
Hey, say that again. Say that a little louder so we can put that out there.
Which part? That I don't care what pick they have.
Yeah, they're gonna get a good pick no matter where they are. Let's just make sure we get the right, you know, leadership in. You know.
Well, you know, and interesting because it just kind of hit me. But who gives a shit what player you get in the draft if you don't have good coaching to get the most out of that player and the right coaching to put that player in best position to succeed? And I think we've seen a lot of that, especially with Mike Smith on the defensive side of the ball over the last few years, you know?
Yeah, you know, you say that, and, you know, one of the things you hear a lot of times, people say, oh, look, if we had lost that Saints game last year, we would have been able to get Quentin Nelson, and they look and see what he's doing in Indianapolis and try to apply it here, or if we should have taken Derwin James, or we should have taken Dalvin Cook 2 years ago, or we should have taken Aaron Rodgers 18 years ago, and all this kind of stuff. Could we have done anything with them? Like, would they have been successful in this system as they are in whatever system they're in? They might be. I don't know, but it's not a 1-for-1 correlation, you know?
Yeah, and at least from my assumption of Mike Smith's defense, I don't think Derwin James fit into that style of defense. Look at the safeties that they've gone after and they've brought in, whether it's a Conti as a free agent or Whitehead, who they just drafted, or Justin Evans. They're all kind of smaller guys who can run around and cover a little bit. And Derwin James was known for coming up, stopping the run, and doing all those things. And I just don't know if he would have fit into this scheme. And I'm starting to think that maybe the Bucs didn't really have any interest in Derwin James, just for the sheer fact that he wasn't a scheme fit, which is unfortunate, because if I was a coach, again, and I'm sure we've all talked about this, if you're a good coach, you take great players and find a way to get them on the field and put them in position to succeed. Chargers are doing just that with Derwin James.
Yeah, I don't even know how many actual plays he's at safety.
Exactly.
He's a safety, starting safety, Derwin James, but he's a box safety at best, and at worst he's like a third linebacker in nickel. Which is good if you're running that Seahawks defense, right? The Cam Chancellor type, the coming down enforcer type, but that's not what Mike Smith ran. That's not really what Duffner's running. And I'll be honest, a guy who missed most of training camp, all the preseason, and most of the first quarter of the season is Vita Vea. He's coming on, and you don't ask for a defensive tackle to come in his rookie season and dominate. But I see him getting better and better. He's not a big fat slob at nose tackle. You think of nose tackles, you just think 340 pounds and he just doesn't move. This guy's athletic and he can move and he can run. I think he's going to be a key part of whatever scheme they run with their next coach. I really think Vita Vea is going to be a good cornerstone piece for this defense for a long time if the next coaching staff continues this progression and he continues to get better and more consistent, which is what comes with experience. Yeah, I just finished up watching the game for a second time, literally 5 minutes before we started. And I paid attention to Villa, and he's all over the field. Like, his speed for his size is really a little mind-boggling.
It's stupid, right?
Yeah, it's like, huh? And if you watch the game, just watch it, casually, and don't really have to look at him. When the Ravens, the few times, because a lot of times, it was only like somewhere between a 2 and 5 yard gain. But the times when they did sort of break, past the second level, a safety or a corner that's not named Brent Grimes would make the tackle, and who's like the next person standing over the running back, Vita Vea. Like, he's down 15 yards down the field, and he's the next closest guy. So I'm with you. I'm really excited about what he's bringing. And you see some of the times where he just tosses guards and centers like they're
as
a rookie, like they're a bag of flour.
Yeah.
I think he's in the top 5 all time at bench press at the combine. He's crazy strong.
What's the most impressive thing about what you just said, Ren, is this guy is doing this on every play. You said you saw him all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if he's doing that every play and he's playing a majority of the game, that's pretty impressive stamina for a guy his size too. Yeah.
He's young. So let's. I almost said, well, I hope we don't waste his 10-year career like we have with McCoy. But what I want to ask you is, you have your fans call in, leave voice messages. It's a huge part of your show, the biggest part of your show, at least for I don't want to say.
By the way, I tend to think that my opinions are the biggest. No, I'm just kidding. No. It is, and honestly, that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to give people a voice, but not do the sports radio thing where it's like your opinion's wrong, my opinion's the only thing that matters. Right? That's what sports radio is. I think everyone should be allowed to have their opinion, and what good is any of our opinions? Because guess what? The Bucs have lost for 10 straight years. My opinion, listen, I want my opinion to be wrong, because if I'm wrong and they're winning, who gives a shit? I just want them to win. And apparently a lot of our opinions have been wrong over the years, or their opinions have definitely been wrong. But I love hearing what the Bucs fans have to say, and I know you guys do as well.
Yeah, actually, I got to tell you, you were doing your other podcast, Off the Edge, if I remember that right, the one with Luke Easterling.
With Luke, yeah.
And you switched to Bucs Uncensored sometime around the first season that I was doing the Pewtercast. And the Instant Cast show, which is our call-in show, was still materializing, was still finding its legs in that first season. And one of the things I had the hardest time with is because you were doing this like call in and leave voicemail kind of thing, was like, I loved the idea of getting to interact with other Bucs fans in that way, but how could I do it but not copy what you were doing? Like, how could I do kind of a similar idea where we could get to talk and interact with these guys? And that's where it took a while to come upon the idea of doing a call-in show, which is just enough different, but it still is that basic idea that your show does and our show does, where we get to talk to the fans. And because we're all fans together,
Yeah.
and we get to commiserate together, and it's a cool thing. It's certainly one of my favorite episodes that we do, for sure.
Well, and listen, you don't ever have to worry about copying me. I mean, I'm not doing anything. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. And, you have different people that probably listen to your podcast than mine. Maybe you're going to take a different approach with it if you were going to go that way. You guys are obviously much smarter than I am. I have no idea how to set up callers and all that. I don't know how to do all that. I'm Polish. I barely know how to screw in a light bulb. I'm glad I got this Apple computer that I'm on now, because my computer before I had to have a mixer board, and I'm just like stressing out. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. So I like that. And again, it's just making Bucs fans realize, hey, y'all, we don't have to fight each other. Mm-hmm. So there's been so much infighting and this and that, and what I've come to the realization of, and maybe you guys are as well, is I've realized a lot of the people that want to fight really just want to fight because they think their opinion is more important, not only than everyone else's, than whatever the Bucs are doing on the field. And I think the three of us, can agree that I don't give a shit what my opinion is. If the Bucs are winning, man, I'm happy. And I find it hilarious when the Bucs win, and then somebody will come back and say, "Oh, I bet you're real happy about that after your opinion." No, I am. I don't care about my opinion. I'm going to share it because we all have opinions, but I just want the team to win. And if they like my opinion, great. If they don't, I don't care. Just get it done on the field. I'm just so tired of being early in December. My birthday is December 8th. And I don't know. I'm trying to watch but every effing year on my birthday,
you do you.
They're out of the freaking playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want to go to a game on my birthday and be like, wow, this actually means something. And I don't think I'm asking for a lot early in December with an entire month left of the season. Come on, Bucs, get it right. And I'll tell you guys, this next hire, we all agree Dirk's gone, right? I mean, he's gone.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. He's gone.
He's gone. Okay, I'm still waffling. I'm still waffling.
I mean,
no, I think he's gone, but I'm still waffling on my personal opinion.
He let the cat out of the bag, right? When he was talking about them and the Bucs when talking about next season, I was like, okay, Dirk. But
but I mean, Justin, he thought he was gone last year. Like, he himself thought he was gone last year, and he comes out, he's like, "Oh, it was real brave of them to bring me back because I wouldn't." I mean,
he's gone.
Yeah,
they just can't. There's been so much turmoil this year, and the pattern is there, right? Struggle at the beginning of the year, go on a little surge, win, give people false hope, and then fall apart at the end. It's the same story every year. So the next hire, guys, is vital. I mean, it's so important. And I know you can say that about every hire, but you've got a core, a nucleus, a young group on both sides. I'll tell you this right now. If they didn't add one player on the defensive side of the ball and all they brought in was a defensive coordinator that knew what the hell he was doing and put guys in position to succeed and called a hell of a game plan, I think this defense could be a top 10 defense in the league. I just don't think that they have any idea what they've been doing on that side of the ball. You give Carlton Davis another year of experience. You get Vernon Hargraves back. I think Ryan Smith has come on a little bit this year. MJ Stewart, we didn't see much of. Some of these other young corners who have been playing in recent weeks have actually been playing better than some of the corners did earlier this year. You'd get Quan back. You get Beckwith back. I like the defensive line. McCoy, I know Ren or one, but it's 13 million and he's over 30 years old. So to me, I would either look to restructure his deal because I don't want to pay him 13 million. Listen, players come and go. That's the way of the NFL. But I like the talent on defense. I think you could maybe use another safety. If they just got a defensive coordinator with a plan and came in, I think this defense turns around in a hurry. And then they got to fix that offensive line. They got the weapons out receiver and tight end. Jameis is your quarterback, no matter whatever anyone else wants to say. Figure out the run game, figure out the offensive line. I like Peyton Barber, but he's not a guy you can dump the ball off and him get 20 yards like a Gurley or a Kamara or a McCaffrey or any of these other top-notch running backs. I think that's such a huge help to your quarterback, and I hope that if it's not Ronald Jones, it's definitely not Jacquizz Rodgers, that they address that as well in the offseason.
Yeah, that was about Peyton Barber. That was something I noticed when we were watching the game up there at Buffalo Wild Wings, was that he can't make anybody miss in space.
No.
I mean,
he's a good player. He's a guy I want on my roster. He's probably not a guy I want as my feature back. He's a guy I want in a reserve role that's going to get touches, at least 5, 7, 10 touches a game. Mm-hmm. But I need a feature back that's going to be more of a game breaker. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because you give him, 2 feet and he'll wiggle through, but you give him, 10 yards open space and 1-on-1, and he's going to run right at the guy. Yeah. It's a little strange, but we were talking earlier. You said you just finished up your pod. Can you give us sort of a pulse of sort of your, without giving anything away, with your voicemails? Like, where is Buccaneer fandom from, Bucs Uncensored point of view? What have you been hearing?
I think a good word is dejected. Numb is the perfect word. And 2 people use the word numb. Not angry, not disappointed. I think we're past all of those emotions. I think we're just to I found myself doing this, and 2 people actually echoed, but I'm watching the game on Sunday and I'm just like, anytime I started to get a little too excited, I'd come right back down. Anytime I started to get a little frustrated, I'd come right back up. I just kind of stayed right in the middle the entire game. I didn't care if they won or lost. I was watching individual players. I had a good time. And after the game was over, I was like, all right, who's going to be the next coach? I mean, that's what's going on in my head, because I'm thinking 2019. I'm not, I mean, I've already checked out of this year. I've checked out of this season. And because the next opportunity they have to be a consistent winner is 2019. They're not going to do it this year. So I'm focused on 19. How are they going to become that consistent winner? And that actually was a topic of my podcast that'll post tomorrow or on Wednesday, is the candidates that we would like to see interviewed.
So let me ask you this about that, because it's kind of been a topic that's been going on out there in Bucs social media land today. Is the question of, is the Bucs job attractive? And Ren, I know that you often kind of say look, there's only 32 of these jobs in the world. Of course it's attractive. But, for somebody who has options, I mean, because Justin, you just went through all of the things that to me actually make the Bucs a very attractive job. Like, we've got a lot going on here in Tampa.
I'm trying to pull up a text message, because I texted a couple of buddies of mine, and I was like, think about the jobs that are going to be open. Here we go. Mm-hmm. So definite jobs that are open. Browns, I would say the Bucs, Packers, Jets are probably going to be open.
Possibly Jags.
Yeah. So, and then I got maybes as maybe Redskins, Cowboys, Cardinals, Bengals, Jaguars, Broncos you could throw in there. To me, if the Broncos job becomes available, I think it's because John Harbaugh becomes available. It just makes a lot of sense for John Elway to just sprint to John Harbaugh and get him. I know a lot of Bucs fans are locked in on Harbaugh, but forget about, even the Broncos, but Jaguars, Bengals, Cardinals, Cowboys, Redskins, Jets, Packers, Browns, Bucs. I think the Browns and the Bucs have two of the most attractive situations right now. You know, when you talk about Jameis Winston, he's
the young core.
He's 24 years old. I think he's shown a lot of good, and I think he's shown a lot of bad. But I think when he's been good, if you're an offensive mind or you're just a coach, it's so hard to find a quarterback. So yeah, you're thinking, all right, I got a 24-year-old who's actually got 4 years of experience. That's pretty good because most likely he's going to play for another 10 years. I've got tons of receivers and tight ends. I'm good there. I need to build an offensive line. And on defense, I got 3 defensive ends if you count Curry, but I know Nassib and Pierre-Paul. I've got a great group of linebackers. I got a young defensive secondary. I got an ownership group that's not going to intermingle in what I'm trying to do. I'm pretty much going to have free reign to do what I want to do in free agency and the draft. Hell yeah, the Bucs job is attractive. The problem is it's been attractive and they continue to make the wrong decisions year after year. They chose Lovey. They didn't revert back to him after being denied by 2 or 3 guys. Lovey was their guy. And then they got rid of Lovey because Dirk was their guy. So really the last 2 coaching searches, they were locked in and got the guy they want. Before that, it was Schiano after Chip Kelly turned them down. But then again, that's when Josh Freeman was the quarterback. So,
right. But then they did that same thing. But Justin, they did that same thing before Schiano with Raheem, right? Like they had Gruden and then they were scared about Raheem. He was their guy. So they got him, right?
Yeah. And the last time they hired an up-and-coming coordinator, and what type of coach? All right, who's the name? Well, what type of coach? You want a retread? You want a John Harbaugh who's been a coach? Do you want a college coach? Do you want a coordinator? The last time the Bucs hired an up-and-coming young coordinator was a 41-year-old coordinator, defensive coordinator for the Vikings named Tony Dungy. And I just wonder if this young team needs that young energy of an up-and-coming coordinator, whether it be offensive or defensive, or a Richard from the Cowboys, or a Matt LaFleur from the Titans, who's offensive coordinator, who's been under Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. He's not young, but I would at least talk to a Vic Fangio, defensive coordinator for the Bears. How have you been able to go to San Francisco and the Bears and build 2 of the dominant defenses in the NFL at 2 completely different franchises in 2 completely different ways? And he's been able to do it. I at least want to talk to the guy. There's plenty of coaches I want to interview, and I hope that the Bucs are swift with this, but I also hope that they do their due diligence and they really zero in on the right guy. Because if they just get locked in on a big name, we could see a lot of the same over the next couple of years. So I really want to make sure that they make the right decision and that the guy they choose is a leader of men and they're not just choosing a guy because of a scheme or this or that. We need a head coach that's a leader of men and a head coach that has a plan. Everything else will play out the way it's supposed to play out. That was a long answer. Sorry.
No, that's how interviews go. You go, hey, Dirk Cutter, and then you sit back and let the guy talk.
People love having me on because I ramble a lot. They're called word avalanches.
We don't do long answers on this show ever, so it's great to have you here. Ever, never. Podcasters never do long answers.
Perfect.
Ren, what were you going to say, buddy?
I have no idea. No, we were sitting with the guys from Real Bucs Talk last home game against the Saints. And the question came up amongst the 4 of us was, and I think it plays off what you were talking about, the defense. It's where do the Bucs need to be fixed? I think the obvious answer is offensive line. Obvious. The first one we're looking at, of course, is right guard. We got Alex Kappa. He's been in there a little bit. I actually watched him for the whole 1 series he was in against the Ravens. He didn't look great. I'll admit it. He gave up a pressure, in my grading system. He gave up pressure, looked much better against the run. A lot of fans are thinking about, well, if we get a new O-line coach in there, we'd like to see what, maybe Beninock, Kappa, what Allie really can do. Maybe he can get Donovan Smith to play to the end of the whistle. things like that. But after offensive line, like you said, you're looking forward to 2019. Like, okay, we get a left tackle round one. Now what?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who's going to be there. Obviously, if they're picking in the 7 through 10 range and a guy like Ed Oliver, a defensive tackle's there, and you can pair him with Vea for years, it's going to be hard to overlook that. But, I mean, right now, the glaring needs is offensive line. And I would almost draft an offensive line in the first 2 rounds, maybe if it's 2 tackles, a tackle and a guard. And, I'm wondering too, and while you were talking, I was wondering, has there been a disconnect between Jason Licht and Dirk Cutter? And nobody's really talked about that. It's never like, the GM and the coach don't really see eye to eye. But think about this offensive line that Jason Licht put together. He came out, he wants nasty. He wants to build the trenches. Donovan Smith at left tackle. Big old Caleb Benenoch at right guard. Bring in Jensen, nasty, physical. And then, by the way, we're going to throw it like 40 times a game, and they're going to need to pass block more than run block because we're never going to try and establish the run. To me, that is the exact contradiction of the type of offensive line that you've built. So to me, there's a disconnect between Licht and Dirk Cutter there, and it's really come to fruition this season. I would get, if you're not going to go with one of the defensive linemen, because it's a very defensive line heavy draft in the first round, I would take a left tackle in the first round, and I would get either a right tackle or a right guard in the second round. And I would still, honestly, I think Donovan Smith is talented. He's only had one offensive line coach in his career. And by the way, that offensive line coach has done shit with the rest of the offensive line other than Ali Marpet. So you got to take that into consideration. And the next coaching staff's probably going to look at Donovan Smith like most of us do and say, he's probably not a left tackle in the NFL. He's probably a right tackle. I think he can play tackle. I'd put him at right tackle, maybe get a left tackle and a guard early in the draft, and quickly you can turn your offensive line around. Just look at what the Colts did this past offseason.
I don't know. You talk about Ali and that he's been quote unquote developed by Warhop. I would actually push back against that.
Not developed.
Whatever.
I just think Ali Marpet is good.
No, but here's the thing. If you think of how good Ali Marpet is naturally to have succeeded the way he has in this system for his first 4 years. By the way, let's remember, Ali Marpet is about halfway through his NFL career. Like just shy of being halfway, which is crazy to think about. But imagine what he could have been had he been under a guy that actually could develop him. Why is he not in the Pro Bowl yet? He should be. With a guy with his talent.
Not only that, he's played how many years? 4 years?
Yeah.
He's played right guard, center, left guard.
Yeah.
So he's playing a different position each year, which this is asinine. If you think about how the Bucs have handled their offensive line, they had Kevin Pamphil and Evan Smith rotating last year at left guard with Marpet at center. Before that, he was at right guard. This year, now Marpet's moved from right guard to center to left guard, but now we have Benenoch in there. And early in the year, we were rotating Benenoch and Evan Smith, and now all of a sudden it's Benenoch and Kappa only got one series, and well, Kappa didn't look good on the one series. Well, why aren't you giving him more series to get his feet wet when the season's long? I mean, there's so many questions I have about how this offensive line is being handled, the plan with this offensive line, and everything I always learned, because it's a position I played, everything I always learned with offensive line growing up was camaraderie, chemistry, knowing what the guy next to you is going to do. Well, when you're changing guys out series after series and year after year, you're changing positions, especially of your best offensive line, what the hell are you doing? I mean, why are you moving Ali Marpet so much? He is by far your best offensive lineman, and you keep moving him around everywhere. Put him at a spot. He's a left guard. Leave him there. Jensen's your center. Leave him there. Figure out left tackle, right tackle, and right guard, and stop rotating, which will end as soon as the coaching regime changes, because no other coach with a brain inside their head would rotate offensive linemen series after series in an NFL game.
I'm pretty sure you just recapped our entire season of what we've been saying with the offensive line this whole year.
This is the most angry I've been about the Bucs in a few weeks. So thanks for bringing that out of me.
Sure. I've been calling it self-preservation since the Washington game. Some people get angry, some people get sad. So I just start going numb. Like you said, like it's like, oh, we're winning, but wait, we're gonna screw it up. So don't get too high. Oh, look, we're losing. Well, don't get too down. We're only down 8. We could come back, and then the game's over. You're like, yep, it's about what I expected it to be. And then you just turn the TV off, and instead of being mad about it for 2 days and yelling at your dog until Wednesday, you just kind of like go, all right.
Well, and what's frustrating as a fan too is not only that, but it's like going back to weeks ago when the Falcons game, and I started the hashtag dance like you're down by 8, but they're down by 8 and they're dancing and hooting and hollering on the sideline. Then you had DeMar Dotson say on Sunday they're down by 1 and they're like celebrating like they just won the Super Bowl in the locker room at halftime. And then they came out and laid an egg in the second half. So, it's just like, what are you guys doing? I mean, who's got control of the locker room? And I think that goes for coaches and leaders alike. I'm surprised. Like DeMar Dotson talked about it after the game. I would want an offensive lineman, a 32-year-old offensive lineman who's been around to kind of stand up and say, "Hey, we got a second half to play here." I think they've been void of that kind of vocal leadership for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, agreed. Now, one more thing about the offensive line. I'm going to stick with George Warhop, and I'm sure you know that he's also the run coordinator.
I do.
Now,
what's the common denominator there?
Well, here's another thing. Like, I was actually going to call in Friday to Dirk Cutter's show, and it, being sort of December and Christmas week and a lot of things going on, I actually missed it. I was out. I was going to call Dirk Cutter and be like, "Hey, can you explain to me what does a run coordinator do?" Like, so I'm asking you, do you have any idea what the hell the responsibilities of a run coordinator are? Like, is he in charge of rotation? Is that who we yell about Ronald Jones ever getting in? Does he decide which side we're going to run heavy on? Because the San Francisco game, it seemed like we kept running behind Beninock, early, and we were doing okay, but everyone's like, how about we try, the Jensen Alley, Donovan Smith side every once in a while?
Now, do you want my accurate, correct answer, or do you want my funny answer as to relating to George Warhop? Because the answer for George Warhop is nothing. The guy does nothing. Well, what does Warhop do when it comes to run coordinate? Nothing. Obviously, they can't run the ball. They haven't run the ball all year long. I mean, a run coordinator, I can go from my experience is I never had that. You had an offensive coordinator, you had blah, blah, blah. But I would imagine a run coordinator is going to get with the coach if there's a passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator, and they create the game plan. There are different types of run plays. It's not just left to right, this, but you can run counters, you can run misdirections. Maybe misdirection works versus this team. Maybe going off tackle works versus this team, or this team, this opponent doesn't have good interior, so we're going to run it up the middle. But obviously, whatever Warhop has been piecing together hasn't worked. And by the way, they never make adjustments in game. And listen, I'm not a big guy. I'm not a big loud voice on for halftime adjustments. Oh, well, they put halftime adjustment. Well, no, they go in, they kind of look it over. It's just like a long period where they can cool off just like sitting on the sideline. But you make adjustments during the game. At some point, you got to say, hey, this same run that we continue to call is not working. Maybe let's try something else. I don't know. The Saints did it. The Saints started running some misdirection, got Kamara involved, and all of a sudden they started running the ball all over the Buccaneers in that second half. They made the adjustments. The Bucs didn't. By the way, did you guys see the statistic? Was it Greg Allman threw out that Ronald Jones is a bust, right? 42 yards this year. He's got 44 yards after contact.
Yeah.
Let that sink in from 40. He's got 42 yards on the year. This was a couple weeks ago. 42 yards and 44 after contact. That tells me your offensive line's terrible. Terrible. Right, Brent?
Yeah, it's. I mean, Ren had a good point. I was talking about Ronald Jones on our Instant Cast earlier this week, and the point that I was making was Ronald Jones has had his, he's had his opportunities between training camp, preseason, and the handful of opportunities he's had during the season, and he's just not capitalized on it. And until he capitalizes on his opportunities, he shouldn't get more reps, except for maybe this part of the season where things don't matter. This is where you bring those kinds of things out and let them go. But Ren had a good point of the problem is they don't use him where he's like, they literally are using him in situations that he was never good in. And you can't that's
the opposite of good coaching.
Exactly. Right. And my biggest problem right now with Dirk Cutter is the idea that, and what I want in a new coach more than anything else is a coach who can be the head coach. I was watching the movie Remember the Titans. You remember that movie? Best football movie probably ever made. And there's a point when Denzel Washington, his character, looks at Coach Yost, the other coach, and he says, get your defense together or I'm taking over. And that's what I want in a head coach. I know they're offensive minded, defensive minded, and whatever. And it may be the reality or not the reality of how it works, but I need a coach who is willing to say, hey, run coordinator, hey, special teams coordinator, hey, whatever, get your shit together, make your team happen, or I'm taking over. And they're going to be the ones that take the lead, however that works. And I don't know what that looks like. I know Tony Dungy, love him. He was never an offensive guy. Okay, fine. I want a guy who can be a head coach and coach the whole team.
A leader of men who has a plan. And I just have never gotten the vibe or the feeling that there was this 3, 4, 5 year plan. It was like, hey, first year, we're going to kind of run a pro style. Hey, second year, we're going to throw it deep a whole bunch of times. This year, we're going to throw it deep. Oh, but now we're going to revert. Like, I have no idea what the plan has been. And you're exactly right. And Ren, you're right too. Ronald Jones, I have no idea. When a team drafts when Sean Payton drafts Kamara, when he selects him, he already knows how he's going to use him. He already knows. He already knows the plays he's going to call. When teams draft skilled players high in the draft, especially if they're offensive-minded coaches, and Dirk Cutter is an offensive-minded coach, they've already got an idea of how they're going to use those players in their – they should be salivating at night and getting these talented players to come and be a part of their offense, something they're skilled at. That's their expertise. Mm-hmm. And Dirk Cutter drafts Ronald Jones. It's almost like they panicked. It's almost like they wanted Rashard Penny or Nick Chubb or Sony Michel. There was a run on running backs right there, and they were just like, oh, shit, no, we'll take Ronald Jones because we have to have a running back. And it's almost like Dirk Cutter never really wanted him, and we never really got to see much of him in the preseason. The preseason, he was behind the backup offensive lineman, which if they're backups to these backups to this offensive line, we know how bad they are. But we've never seen, and I know he's not a great receiver, but find a way to get the guy in space. In a little screen pass or a pitch, or be creative in getting him in space. No, we're going to run him up the middle, and then we're going to try and throw him passes as a receiver. Like, what in the absolute hell are you doing? Again, opposite of good coaching is taking good players and putting them in the worst possible position to exploit their negatives rather than exploit their positives.
All right, Justin, one more topic for you, and we'll get out of here for tonight. We've talked a lot about the coaching. We've talked a lot about bad coaching. We've talked a lot about different positions. Let's talk about Jason Licht. Let's talk about our GM. You talked about him a little bit earlier, with how he's drafting people. And then you got to imagine on some level, he goes out and gets nasty. He goes out and tries to find these guys that seem really good. And then he watches what the coaching staff does, or rather doesn't actually do with them. But he's been around. I mean, he's had his time. Does he go? Is this a full regime change up and down the board, or does Jason Licht get to roll it again and bring in a new coach?
I think this is, we can debate it, but this is the much bigger decision within the walls at One Buck Place. I think they've made the decision on Cutter. the question they've got to answer is, do we feel we have talent on this team, talent enough to win? And if we feel we've got talent, then you could look at Jason Licht and say, hey, he's done a good job. We can point out every mistake he's made. We can also point out every positive he's made. No GM is going to bat 1,000. To bat 500, I think is strong. And I think Jason Licht has identified talented players and have brought them in. They're a much more talented roster. And I think the three of us can agree, they're a much more talented roster now than when he took it over under Mark Dominic. So that's a positive. He overcame Lovie Smith's free agent gathering his first year. I don't think those were Jason Licht's moves. I think those were Lovie Smith's moves. Obviously missed on the kicker, missed on running backs. But now, guys, do we question whether or not Jason Licht can evaluate running backs or whether Dirk Cutter can evaluate running backs? I don't know. I will say this. Dirk Cutter has been here, 4 years? Light's been here 5 years. So almost the entire time Licht has been here with Cutter, and they haven't found a running back. As I said, I think there was a disconnect along the offensive line. And if there was a disconnect along the offensive line, I wonder if there was disconnects other places. But, he went out and got Nassib. I mean, you want to talk about negatives, positives, Nassib. I still think Vinny Curry was a good addition. He dealt with some injuries, but at $7 million a year, to have him, Nassib, and Jason Pierre-Paul, that's really strong. Did draft Beckwith, who I'm a huge fan of Beckwith. I wish he wouldn't have been injured this season. Anxious to see how this young secondary progresses with whoever the next coach is going to be on the defensive side. So positives and negatives. I think for every negative I can find a positive. For every positive I can find a negative. I wouldn't be opposed to him coming back another year to see, is he going to mesh with the next coach? How's that going to work out? I don't think it would be as, what's the word I'm looking for, as catastrophic if Jason Licht stuck around a year, they brought in a coach, and then, hey, we're gonna move on and bring in a GM that maybe more meshes with this new coach. But I think Jason Licht has done enough to warrant at least another year and see what he can do with a different head coach. Because while he was part of the change from Lovie to Dirk, really Jason Licht has only had one coaching regime, Lovie Dirk, but kind of blended together. I want to see what Jason Licht and how he works with another head coach and whether or not that can mesh well. Because I do think Jason Licht has an eye for talent. I'm just wondering if it's him that there's not been the glue to bring the roster together to become a truly competitive team, or if it was the coaching staff that wasn't able to bring that talent together. I believe there's talent, and if I believe there's talent, I believe the GM has done something right. So I'm okay with him coming back another year. And they just gave him a 1-year extension. So maybe that gave us a little glimpse as to their thinking as well.
We all know hindsight's 20/20, but let's go back 3 years ago. Has it been 4 now? 3 years ago. The Glazers, and Jason Licht, they have their meeting. They decided to let go Lovie Smith. They gave control to Jason Licht to pick the next coach. In that moment, in that time, given the information that he had at hand, did Jason Licht make the right decision in hiring Dirk Cutter?
I think it was the right decision.
So you can't hold that against him now.
Yeah, I think at the time we saw, and we know that the Glazers have longed for offense and quarterback, and we knew that the importance and emphasis they had on Jameis Winston, and they didn't want to possibly lose Dirk Cutter, and they were going to make a change from Lovie Smith anyway. And so I thought Dirk Cutter was the right pick at that time. I also think that Jason Licht might have bought into some of the things that Dirk Cutter said. I'll be honest. I bought into a lot of the things Dirk Cutter said over the years. Carry a big motherfucking stick.
Kind of became a thing.
Oh, we're going to become, kind of became a thing. But,
a little thing.
But honestly, the saying, we look at the fan base wanted to believe in that. But he didn't want to be nasty or physical. They never were nasty and physical. But that's, to me, what that saying means. And then he goes the next year, we want to build a badass football team. There's nothing badass about your football team. There's nothing badass about the play calling. There's nothing badass about how physically manhandled they get by the opposing team every week. Like, there's nothing badass about that. So I bought into a lot of the things Dirk Cutter said. Maybe Jason Licht did the same thing. As we said, that offense that he ran when he was offensive coordinator, when Jameis was a rookie, it's the offense that Jameis succeeds in. Running the football, they stuck to the run. Doug Martin, Charles Sims, both these guys. I mean, they were running the football, which opened up the play-action pass, and they were having success. And then they just got away from it when he became head coach. I don't understand it. I don't get the evolution of Dirk Cutter as a head coach. And, while it was the right decision when it was made initially, Dirk Cutter ended up proving that it was a wrong decision with the decisions he made as head coach.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't predict that. You can't predict the decisions a guy's going to make, and Dirk Cutter made a lot of bad ones. All right, last question I want to have for you guys, other than the coach, most important thing of this offseason.
Well, that's a tough question, because with the coach, what comes with that? Are we keeping the defensive side? Are we keeping the offensive side? Which coach do you get? Culture change. How do you even do that? Leadership. How do you do that? Is it salary cap? I hope we keep Mike Greenberg. I think he's great at it. Yeah. Just like you, it's offensive line's the problem. But what I always liked about Jason Licht was when he always fixed the huge glaring problem. Whatever the huge glaring problem is, he fixes it, and he overfixes it.
Yeah.
Like last year it was defensive line. Fixed it. Year before that it was wide receiver. Fixed it.
Yeah. We forget about everything else. We're just going to target one position each offseason. I'm really hoping that offensive line is it. Eventually, in about 10 years, they're going to have a complete team.
Exactly.
Once they get through
I mean, that's like how I-4 and 275 and all that works, right? Like, you do it now, and by the time you're done with it, you got to go back and start over at the beginning, right?
Exactly.
That's how fixing the team works.
I wouldn't mind, and I'm not saying this is the most important thing, but some commitment to Jameis Winston. I believe he's going to be the quarterback. I would like some sort of new coach to come in and say, "This is my guy. Let's cut the shit." Cut all the bait. He's 24 years old. $20 million, by the way, not that high for a starting quarterback in the NFL. Not sure if we've looked at all the salaries. But, by the way, Sam Bradford made like $25 million a year for like the last 5 years. So, yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm actually more excited about this offseason than I was probably coming into this season. So a lot of hope on the way, I hope.
Okay, Justin, let me ask you this. It's a coaching regime change. Is this a complete rebuild? Because that's the thing that normally happens, right? A new coach comes in and all of a sudden, oh my God, now it's 3-4 years before we're going to be able to do anything because they got to go into a rebuild. I don't feel like that's the case this time.
Which is, it didn't even hit me until now, which is why I'm not pushing hard for an older coach or a coach who's been a head coach before, because it's almost like, hey, I'm going to do it my way or the highway, and I'm going to get rid of a bunch of guys. I'm going to bring my own guys in. I think you get a young up-and-coming coordinator, and he's going to come in just energized to want to be a great head coach, but put players in position to succeed and work with the young nucleus you have. So that would be my one concern with going after an older coach, is that they're kind of stuck in their ways, and they're going to try and just get their players in rather than just trying to build with what they have. And I think the Bucs have a very, very talented young nucleus that they need the next head coach to come in and build with, not deplete and then bring in their own guys. This isn't a rebuild. This is time to take this team to the next level, and that's what I hope this next coach does.
That was Justin Pawlowski of the Bucs Uncensored Podcast. And Ren, I got to tell you, he was one of those guys. Rick Stroud did it before, and here's Justin. We just kind of said, hey, here's a topic. Go.
Right? You don't have to say go. Just kidding.
You don't even have to finish the topic.
Yeah. So, Dirk Cutter, any thoughts? And then go wash your hands, go grab a sandwich,
Play a game of PUBG.
play a little game of PUBG, and then come back and go, offensive line. Thoughts? And then
Pick up a book, read a chapter.
go walk the dog. But no, that's the great part about podcasting. And that's why we have these guests on. You know, it's what makes it so more unique than radio, where there's somebody you really want to tune into, like maybe Almond or Stroud or the guys from Pewter Report are going on, the local radio show, and you get them for like 6 minutes, and it's like, okay, but I have a lot of questions.
Right.
I want to
dive back into that. I mean, it's well, because we talked about it a little bit with, I think, Pat Donovan when he was on the show earlier this year. They've got the new show with him and Trevor and Rick and Jenna. Is it just
good
the four
show?
of them?
Great show.
It's a good show. But even Pat was saying, like, in his role as the host, his job is to keep everything moving, and he's got a 15-minute segment or a 10-minute segment or a 9-minute segment, and they've got to get it done, and move on. And they don't have time to sit in it, whereas we do here in the podcast. So, lots of fun stuff there. But Ren, man, I got to tell you, I think the biggest highlight, and I don't want to belabor this, but it just jumped out at me so much. My biggest highlight from Justin's talk was, or from the interview with Justin, not his talk, but from that conversation. Our conversation with Justin was where he stopped for a minute when we talked about Jason Licht, and he paused and he said, I think that question about whether or not they let Jason Licht go, that's the biggest question in one Buck this week or in these next several days, and I hadn't thought about it, but I think he's right. Out of all the decisions they have to make, I think that's probably it could be the most significant one, or at least maybe even the most difficult one that the Glazers will have to make.
Yeah, I think difficult's the word, because as you just heard, Justin went into it. There's pros and cons, and if you just look at the talent of the roster, it's real hard to be sort of anti-Jason Licht.
Right.
There are some people out there that will never forgive him for their Wild pick.
Sure.
There are some people out there that'll bring up some free agents that he brought in, high-priced free agents that he brought in that didn't pan out. But then there's always a counter-argument to that. We're pretty much, no matter what happens in these next two games, I think everyone thinks that Cutter is gone, and he might even already be told that he's done as Buccaneers head coach. No matter what you feel about Jameis Winston, he's coming back next year.
Right.
Like, he'll be in camp next year. Now, you might want to have a conversation down the road about if they draft a quarterback or they bring somebody in, or maybe they just, try to sign Ryan Griffith and he's the 2 and they just roll with that. But, that's a lot of that's going to be about the next head coach, if we're saying that Dirk Cutter is definitely going to be fired. But like I told Justin, I'm not sure if it made the interview conversation or not, that I feel, and I'm going to start asking this question a lot, but I think that it's probably a prerequisite to have, as for the new head coach, if there is one, that the prerequisite being that, hey, Jameis is a quarterback, take it or leave it. Like, if everything is equal between two guys and one guy's not sure about Jameis and one guy loves Jameis, the guy that loves Jameis is getting the job.
Sure.
Because I think that's where the Glazers are on Jameis, and we can go back and forth, and Justin even talked about his age, and we can talk about how all the good stats have gone up, all the bad stats have gone down, except for wins and losses, and you have arguments for that. So I think the most difficult decision, because you have really good arguments on both sides, is all about Jason Licht. And, he's picked his quarterback, and he's picked his head coach in Dirk Cutter, and right now it's not working. And those are things when us as fans of the NFL see from other teams on the outside, and we're not, in it as deep as we are here with the Buccaneers, that those are things that get you fired as a GM.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your win-loss record, how your coach does, and if you missed on your first, you know, if people feel you've missed on your draft, especially your number one draft pick, then usually you're shown the door. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be the most difficult decision. I hope he stays. I'm going on record. I hope he stays. I think he's built a lot of talent. You know, it's not necessarily his job to. I mean, how do you come up with a formula to know that this guy is going to be able to play with the guys that are already on your team?
Yeah.
You know, like that's a coach's job. That's not the GM's
job.
job.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's kind of what I was getting at when I was saying, you know, I imagine if you're Jason Licht, how maddening it has to be to go out and get all these guys and get all these people that you think are going to be good. And by the way, he's not the only one who thinks they're going to be good. I mean, you remember when we brought in Chris Baker and J.R. Sweezy, and we brought in who else did we bring in? Robert Ayers, and we brought in
even Deshaun Jackson.
Deshaun. Yeah, thank you, Deshaun Jackson. You know, oh man, this is going to be awesome, and you know, who are you going to guard, and who are you going to do this, and we're going to get nasty, and I mean, it even
re-signing Mike Smith.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we do all these things, and
no one says that's a bad idea off the bat.
No.
With free agents.
No.
There has been a little talk about the draft, but usually the draft picks have turned out opposite. Like people who are against Kendall Beckwith. Everyone likes the Kendall Beckwith pick.
Right.
People who are against the Vita Vea pick. Past few weeks, handful of games, 4 games, people are starting to go, oh, wait, I see what you're talking about.
Right. VH3. I mean, talk about VH3. Everybody was all up on his ass 2 years ago, and now we're like, man, VH3's looking good if we can just get him back and get him healthy.
Yeah, so it seems when he makes the moves, and this is something you like to say, with the information you have at the time, I've never seen a huge pushback on free agents that he's brought in.
Sure.
You know, and then someone being right about it. Yeah. You know, everyone's excited about it, and you know, they look at their stats like, this guy's going to help us, and when they end up not, then it's all of a sudden Jason Licht's fault. But you don't hear this. When they're signed, you don't hear a lot of people going, yeah, this isn't going to work out. Everyone's super excited about it. Then when it doesn't, you start pointing fingers.
Right. You know, and you got to wonder why isn't it? And, you know, at that point, that's when you have to at some point start looking at the coaching situation. And we all are. Even so, I think it was Warren Sapp was kind of saying something the other day about coaching matters. And, you know, certainly it does. All right, Ren, well, why don't we go ahead and turn our attention to this Ravens game. Now, to be fair, full disclosure for all of our listeners out there, I have not rewatched this game. I know you have. You actually just did it, like, shortly before we started recording tonight. So it's fresh in your brain. So I'm going to depend on you for a lot of these, you know, really to further our conversation here. But for myself, just, you know, throwing it out there for everybody, I find it more and more difficult to just kind of care about going back into these games at this point. But I am curious to talk about the players and see how the players are doing and how we can judge those guys. So, Ren, I will put it to you first, man. Do you have any final thoughts about this game, Bucs versus Ravens, what you saw when you rewatched the tape?
I think the Ravens are lucky they won the game. The Bucs had them stop time after time after time, and it was just like one of those fluke things. An offense, maybe it's a drop, you know, maybe it was an untimely penalty. The Bucs didn't really shoot themselves in the foot in the second half. In the first half, they did, but in the second half, we talked about at the Instacast, they didn't have the ball. Like, they got it 4 times, and one time they got it for one play. You know, at one point the Ravens got the ball, and it was like 4 minutes left in the third quarter. By the time the Bucs got the ball, it was like 12 minutes left in the fourth. They were driving down. That's when they went for it on fourth down. They got the ball one time in the fourth quarter.
Huh.
And that's when we went through it on fourth down. They missed it. The Ravens had the ball. It was like 7.5 minutes left in the game, and they never gave the ball up. They got it inside the 10 and started kneeling it down. I mean, And then you watch it, and it was really hard to blame the defense because for the most part, and I know you look at all those yards, but traditionally from the running backs, those aren't where the yards really came from. There were a couple of where they got to the second level and the third level, and those hurt. But the Bucs did what they needed to do going into this game was to get the Ravens in third and longs and make Jackson throw the ball. And he only really made a couple of throws. But what he did was he got away from pressure and got outside and broke containment and picked up the first down with his legs. And he did it like time after time after time, especially in the second half. And it was just like, one point it's like third and, it was like 3rd and 12. Nassib comes in there, misses a sack. Vea misses it, and he spins out of it and runs for a first down. It's like, and it just seemed like that happened time after time after time. So I think the Bucs played a good game on both sides of the ball. I really did, except for those drops early on. I guess maybe once they got used to the weather, who knows? But
yeah, I think Mike Evans said something about that. He's like they went up there and he said the coldness made the ball feel like bricks. Like they were just so hard, not just cold, but they were hard, and it took them a little bit to get used to catching that kind of a ball. Something that might be a little bit harder to simulate in Tampa. Oh, wait, we've got an indoor training facility that they can put down to whatever degree they want. Hopefully they're doing that this week, in preparation for their next game. Well, they're playing inside though, aren't they?
Well, kind of.
Dallas?
I mean, Dallas is half inside.
They
still got the hole. They still got the hole in the middle. But they practice in the rain, but they didn't practice in the cold and rain.
Right.
So that's something you would think would have been taken care of during pregame warmups.
You'd hope.
Yeah. That they would have gotten used to that. But, if that's what they're saying, then that's what they're saying. And I wasn't there and I can't tell you exactly what happened. So I don't like it, but I'm just going to have to accept that's what it is. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, the real big sticking point for me as a Bucs fan after the loss, looking for something to point fingers at and be angry at, is Brent Grimes. I watched him just about exclusively on my rewatch, and if the Ravens ran the ball, and I think they did it 42 times, they need to prorate Brent's game check and take all those runs away. He was beyond making business decisions. Deion Sanders used to say, "You're not a good tackler." He's like, "That's a business decision." He's like, "I can't get hurt. I'm the best cover." Brent Grimes is nowhere near good enough not to stick his nose in there. And there were times, and I mean multiple times, like almost to like going to the other hand, counting like finger 6, finger 7, where Brent Grimes is actually running away from the ball carrier, like actually giving like the yardage from where he enters the picture where he is to the ball carrier. Mm-hmm. By the time the ball carrier gets stopped, he's further away from the ball carrier. Like he had zero interest in trying to stop the run. Now on that last drive, like I talked about where the Ravens were out the clock, there was a couple of times they had him up the line of scrimmage and he did stick his nose in there. I think he got like one tackle. Yeah. Where he was unblocked and came in and got the guy, but it was like on 3rd and 2 and they ended up picking up 3. So, you didn't really do your job, I guess. What? But you go back and watch this. No, Brent, it was you go back and watch it. Like it is, as a Bucs fan, it's infuriating.
No,
now, I know
like what's bothering me about this is, okay, if you can look at the tape and see that that's happening, the coaching staff has to be able to look at the tape and see that that's happening. Right. I would venture to say this might not be the first time it's happened over the course of the year. I get that Brent Grimes might still be the best cornerback, maybe, on this team when he's actually playing or when he's engaging. But I mean, how do you get away with that as a player? I don't understand.
You don't. Like, I mean, no one's asked the question. I bet if you asked Dirk Cutter about Brent Grimes, he's going to defend him a little bit. I think someone asked him, oddly enough, get this, remember when we had Rick Stroud on and I asked him about, addition by subtraction with the sort of Deshaun Jackson and then Brent Grimes. Stroud, I think last week, asked the subject about Brent Grimes, and he is really good at asking the question, being more delicate about it by just coming out and say, hey, Brent Grimes is really sucking it up against the run. What are you going to do about it, coach? So, but Cutter defended him just like I have in past. Like, Brent's actually played really good. And then he sort of, didn't address the second part about how he's defending the run. And this is a question that I tried to throw out there today on Buccaneers Live, Miller Lite with Casey and Scott. They ignored it. I don't blame them. That was not a happy chat room.
Right.
and then I've also actually, I feel like I've been saying Stroud's name a lot, but he's doing his pod, and it's a mailbag day. So that's the question I sent in. I'm like, help me understand when it became extremely apparent the Ravens are going to turn back into the Ravens, which means they're going run heavy, that the defensive, like Duffner, couldn't recognize that Brent Grimes didn't want to be in there, like against the run. And why did you sub for him? Like, put in somebody, if you have to stop the run to win the game, and that your outside corner has no intention of trying to do that, you have to replace him and just take your lumps in the few times they're going to pass the ball. If that's your thinking, like, well, he's our best cover corner, we can't take him out.
Right.
But they ran the ball 42 times.
Yeah. They played a lot of plays. They had a lot of plays in this last game.
Yeah. I mean, that's like classic old school football. Like you got guys that have been coaching in high school for like 40 years, and this is what they do. They just don't give you the ball, and they just grind it out 4 or 5 yards at a time and just doop, doop, doop down the field, doop, doop, doop down the field. And the game's like 18-8. Mm-hmm. And that's how they win. But yeah, that's what I'm
Did
hoping.
Stroud answer back?
He has to record yet. It was for his podcast.
Okay. Oh, for tonight.
So yeah, so it'll be out. If anyone's interested, it will be out Wednesday. Wednesday at midnight it'll drop. So whenever you hear this, if you're listening to it Wednesday, then you can, just go to Sports at Tampa Bay and see if he answers a question, or go back.
Because we know everybody out there is listening to the Pewtercast before they listen.
Yeah, you definitely got. Yeah, you got to go back. Duh. Yeah. I mean, ours comes out first.
Exactly.
It will be. We'll see. I mean, we do have 2.5 hours before midnight, so it might not come out first. But those are my takeaways. Was I think the Ravens were lucky. I think the offense shot themselves in the foot in the first half, and the defense didn't really play as bad as all the yards they gave up, sort of on the ground. And Brent Grimes should not have been playing the second half of that football game.
Do you think Brent Grimes needs to be playing the rest of the season?
Sure. Against Dallas, yeah, absolutely. Unless Dallas just decides to run at him, every time they get the ball, and he doesn't want. See,
because I got to tell you, what you described to me is what I call that's a fireable offense to me. Like if like that just seems so egregious to me. The idea that you're going to turn around and run away from something like that.
Yeah, a few times. Like I know I said in the Instacast when I watched the game live, he was actually sort of running parallel, and I did see that where it was almost like a defenseman in soccer. It's like, okay, like I'm not closing any ground on you, but I'm also like we're both running to the goal line together. It's like, well, eventually, if everyone else misses you, then I will go. I'm the last line of defense. Like he was playing the kicker on a kickoff or the punter on a punt return, where he's just you're not really making any effort to run down the field and make the tackle. But if the guy comes to me, then I'll get him. But yeah, he was making no effort to close the gap whatsoever, and it was bad. It was really bad. Now, when I say this, it's hard to sort of point the finger about people who play football and take that kind of punishment, but I would just like to hear other people's right. I know, but it's like the most dangerous magic trick in the world is catching the bullet, right?
Yeah.
There's I don't know the stats, but it seems like 2 or 3 people die every year trying to pull off this catch the bullet trick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I have the right to call a magician a sissy because he doesn't do that trick when I'm not doing the trick either. You know what I mean?
Right.
So Brent Grimes out there playing. I just would have thought that what upsets me is it's not shocking that's the effort Brent Grimes gave, honestly. He's been not, shall we say, committed to run fits this year.
Fair enough.
At the cornerback.
Uh-huh.
So what upsets me more is that the defensive staff, and of course we have to hold Mark Duffner most accountable, didn't recognize it, that the Ravens were not throwing the ball anymore, and make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And get somebody in there that could have stuck their nose in there, could have stopped some of those runs for shorter gains, and maybe we gotten the ball back, and maybe we could have gone down and tied it up. Or took the lead,
Right.
So those are my final thoughts.
All right.
On the season-ending game that was.
Yeah, season ending. Because after this week we downshift one show every 2 weeks. No, I don't know with the holidays and stuff coming up next week. I'm not exactly sure what our schedule is going to look like. So maybe, I really wish that I could add more to this conversation. I just can't. It would be complete and total BS if I even tried to right now. So, Ren, why don't we go ahead and move into grades, and
Sure.
We'll wrap this up. How do you grade out this Buccaneers game? Offense, defense, and try to do it objectively as possible. Like, we know that it's kind of all BS at this point. Like, it's you know what I mean when I say that. Like, the rest of the season is just kind of but like objectively as possible. How do you grade out how our offense did, how our defense did, the special teams, and then obviously the team as a whole?
I'm going to give the offense a C, like totally average, right down the middle. I thought they did some good things against a very, very good defense. I think they had some bullcrap calls called against them.
I agree.
In some key situations. Mm-hmm. But I also think, especially in the first half, and we've talked about it, you've heard it on other pods a bunch of times, drops, man. Mm-hmm. I don't care about what the ball felt like. You get paid a lot of money to catch that thing, so catch it. So I'm giving them a C right down the middle because
I'm sorry, let me pause you there. Something I noticed in this game, and it really surprised me, especially given the weather conditions that were out there, is...
I already have the answer.
Okay, then answer it before I even ask it.
Okay. Apparently, the tacky gloves, when they get wet, become slick.
Really?
And this is something I learned, trying to get that question answered about Brent Grimes with Casey and Scott. Adam Humphries was actually on the Monday, get to know player at Hooters Casey show.
Yep.
I don't know what it's called. Probably All Access or Insider or something like that.
Yep.
And that question came up, like, why weren't you wearing gloves? Why wasn't Mike wearing gloves? Like, why weren't you guys wearing gloves? And that was what he said. And they both sort of looked at each other and went, you mean to tell me that the NFL doesn't, or somebody out there doesn't have gloves that don't become slippery when wet?
Right.
And Adam's like, I don't know. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not even paraphrasing because I didn't hear the interview, but I'm sure Adam's response was something like, yeah, weird, right? You figured,
right.
Because
that's what I literally am sitting here thinking, like, all the engineering marvels we have.
Yeah. Like, that cannot be right. Like, that cannot be right. Like, there's no way that that's correct. But according to Adam Humphries, that's why they didn't wear gloves.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So you gave the C to an offense, or you gave the offense a C. All right.
I'm giving the defense a C as well. Like, I don't think they played as bad as, because when you have a team like taking these huge like half quarters at a time to go down the field and score, or go down the field and run the game, run the clock out. Mm-hmm. It was really bad when they only had like, a minute and a half or something, maybe even less than a minute, and the Ravens went down and kicked a field goal right before the half. That was hurtful. Mm-hmm. A guy that really has a little trouble with accuracy, anything further than 7 yards down the field, sort of march him down, and did that. But it was, I thought they held up against the run pretty well. All things considered, they just could not contain Lamar Jackson, and he ran the ball a lot. So I know it sort of sounds like an oxymoron there, but so I'm giving the defense a C2. Special teams, I guess I have to give him a C- because I guess Brian Anger didn't take a lot of snaps before up there in the warm-ups either to know the ball was hard and cold. That slipped through his fingers.
Now, did that ball slip through his fingers, or was it just snapped like super high?
He had his hands on it.
Okay.
Yeah, Anger had his hands on it.
You get your hands on it, you got to catch it. You got to pull it in.
Yeah, and he had both of them on there. It wasn't. Yeah, it didn't. It wasn't like it was snapped over both their heads. Like it hit him. He got his hands on it, and he didn't have to come out of his crouch or anything. It was just. Yeah. He wasn't expecting the ball to be that heavy or wet or that fast. I don't know. Who knows?
Right.
But I don't think our kickoff coverage was too good either. So I guess I'll give him a D. Okay. I thought Bobo Wilson did some okay things in kickoff returns, but I thought our kickoff coverage was pretty poor. But then we did get the turnover, but that really wasn't anything the deep punt coverage team did. It was just a real dumb play by the Raven. Mm-hmm. So there you go. And overall, I guess C-. I guess I got it. It even sort of works now instead of these made up grades where we go. Right. A, B, A. Overall D because we lost. This actually sort of averages out to a C-. It was. Right. It was so the game
played a very mediocre game.
Both of them did. It was just a mediocre football game. The game was not won or lost on turnovers. Mm-hmm. It was truly one of those games where you can go back and look at 2 or 3 plays on each side and go, that's why the Bucs lost. That's why the Ravens won. Mm. And all the other plays were, they were 4-yard runs up the middle.
Fair enough. All right, Ren. Well, with that, that's going to do it for this episode of the Pewtercast. We do still have a whole other half of our Final Thoughts show that'll be coming out a little bit later this week, and that's the one where we're going to get to some iTunes reviews. We're going to get to some emails from our fellow fans. We might even try to make up a couple from last week where we missed that. So you guys make sure you be on the lookout. That's coming out here real soon on the backside of this. I want to thank Justin Pawlowski for joining us as well. That was a great conversation. But Ren, as we wrap this up, why don't you tell the folks out there where they can find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is on Twitter, at RenDaxt, REN_DAXT. I'm always down to talk some Buccaneers football. And if you don't want to put your opinion on blast, you want to keep it sort of super secret, my DMs are always open, and I'll talk Buccaneers football in there with you too.
And if you guys would like to get a hold of me, you can find me at Brent Allen Live across all the social medias. And the show is at The Pewtercast on Twitter and on Facebook. You can find us at thepewtercast@gmail.com if you'd like to send in an email that we will read on a future episode, as long as we have that episode that particular week, Ren. And, hey, listen, getting to interact with you guys, that's really one of the more fun aspects of being a part of this Bucs fan community. I want to say thank you to all of our patrons, all of our patron supporters over there. You guys are awesome as well. If you guys want to find out more about how you can support the show, head on over to patreon.com/thepewtercast, and you can find out all of that. And let's hear. I would wish you guys a happy holidays, but we're going to be back with you before all of that stuff kicks off. So you're going to have to wait for that just a few more days. But like we said, the second half of the show is coming out, and we will be out with our Buck in the News show as we head into the Cowboys game heading up this weekend as well. That'll be coming out later this week. So until then, guys, we'll see you later, and go Bucs.